Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter. Or of course, you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. Let's have a bit of a psychological deep dive into the face-off between Chris EUBANK Jr. and Conor Benn. It was brilliantly hosted by Adi Oladipo, who asked some fantastically probing questions. And both fighters ended up giving answers that, in my opinion, revealed an awful lot, not just about their mindset, but about their motive in saying what they were saying at any given time. Yeah, some of the things that they were saying would have been instinctual, as though you're having a back and forth argument. But some of the things were planned, in my opinion, and they were planned to achieve a certain goal. So we're going to talk a little bit about all that. One thing I will say, if you've yet to see the face-off, please go and watch it and then come back, because there will be spoilers in this video. First and foremost, we'll start off with one of the early questions Adi asked. He turned to Chris EUBANK and he said, "You're on the cusp of a world title shot. Conor is not a 147. Has he bitten off more than he can chew?" And EUBANK replies, "Yeah, it's a big ask, but he has big balls and I respect that about him." Now, you don't too often hear a fighter really praise an opponent, do you? He's sitting there talking about the big balls of Conor Benn. In other words, the bravery. This guy is brave. Why would you do that? Well, think about the connotation of this. What is it that you're saying? You know, Franklin D. Roosevelt, the former president of the United States, he had a very famous quote. And that quote was, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear." That is what bravery is. That is what courage is. That is what heroism is. It is about rising above the fear, which does exist, to do something that you know is vital. Well, Conor Benn is doing something vital. He's chasing legacy. But what EUBANK is saying here is that you are taking on a mammoth task. You are afraid, or you should be if you're not, because what you are trying to do is insurmountable. You are taking on an obstacle that you cannot possibly overcome. So straight away, by praising him, he's actually putting a seed of doubt in his mind, because he's telling him you're only brave because you're trying to overcome something that you cannot possibly overcome. Now, later on, Adi goes on to ask EUBANK, "Is points enough, considering you've mentioned he's not ready and he's a level down?" And EUBANK replies, "My goal is to punish my opponent till he quits or is knocked out." And Adi asks Benn, "Do you believe you can stop EUBANK? No one's put him down before." And Benn says, "I believe I can. I believe in myself, and I believe I can get the stoppage. The other guys he's fought, they're not me." So think about what he's saying. I believe I can. I believe in myself. I believe I can get the stoppage. Yes, self-belief's brilliant, but there isn't that factor of knowing. So straight away, you know that Conor Benn believes that he can do something, but it's different when you know it. So what Chris EUBANK is trying to do is place that seed of doubt in his mind to make the obstacle look even bigger. It's one thing for you to tell me, "I'm really fit, Chris. I've been training and I believe I can climb Mount Everest." And instead of me encouraging you and saying, "Yeah, I know you can do it," I'll sit there and I'll tell you, "I don't know, man. It's a lot bigger than anything you've done before. You're not ready really for the obstacles you've got to overcome. Do you know how cold it is up there? Do you know what the winds are like? Do you know what the pressure's like just walking up there? The air's going to feel thinner as you get higher and higher." I'm putting seeds of doubt in your mind. You believe you can climb Everest, but if you've never done it before, are you really sure? And then when you've got someone telling you you really can't, it starts to plant these little seeds of doubt. That is what EUBANK's trying to do here. Apart from that, EUBANK is asked about why he would take this fight and why it makes sense. And he says it makes sense from a business perspective, but not an ability perspective. And Benn replies, "I get paid. I've got plenty of paydays. Look at his trajectory and look at mine. I'm not doing this because there's money involved. I know I can beat you." Now he's talking about knowing. Now he's trying to will himself to believe. But EUBANK then goes on to make the point that this is Benn's first big fight, walking out in front of 20K. And Benn immediately tries to rubbish it. And EUBANK then explains, "But you haven't headlined." In other words, it's one thing to be in front of a big crowd, but have you been in front of a big crowd in a fight of this magnitude? I have. I've been in there with George Groves. I've been in there with Billy Joe Saunders where there was a lot of pressure. Have you? And he essentially is telling him, "I've been somewhere where you haven't been before." And he said it makes a huge difference and you don't know it yet. "I know what you feel because I've been there," he tells Conor Benn. So everything EUBANK does again is belittling Conor Benn. "I've lived the experiences you haven't. You are delving into the unknown in multiple ways, in terms of the magnitude of this fight, in terms of the weight class that you're going to be operating in. Yeah, it's one thing to be sparring the likes of John Ryder and, I get that. but this is a real fight with smaller gloves. How are you going to cope, Conor? That's what he's trying to place in his mind. He's telling him as well, I've fought at a higher level and I'm bigger, I'm more experienced. So yeah, I'm really impressed by your big balls and bravery, but you're taking on an impossible task, and that's why I'm impressed. You can't beat me. He actually says to him at one point, it would take an act of God for you to beat me, a miracle. At one point, Addy asks, listen, Chris, you're undermining him, but he has beaten everybody with flying colours that he's had to face. So doesn't that sort of show that he's ready to step up? That's what Addy implies. And EUBANK tells Ben, you do understand I'm not who you fought. And Ben replies, yeah, you're probably the best fighter I fought. Now that's a consolation again. Again, you're admitting you're going to new levels. Because EUBANK turns and says, no, not probably. Like, I'm not Algieri. Like, he's confirming it. So Ben now flips the script and decides to go on the offensive. And he says, you're a big underachiever. What have you actually achieved? You beat a washed up De Gale, lost to Groves, you lost to Billy Joe Saunders. Yeah, you beat Williams, but what have you actually achieved at the age of 33? You think you're out of your dad's shadow? And EUBANK replies, yes. And Ben starts laughing and dismissing this idea that everyone in boxing knows that EUBANK's capable of great things. So he's now flipping it around and he's mocking Chris EUBANK. He's mocking his achievements and his ability. He's putting doubts in his mind now. You're making yourself out to be some superstar. What have you actually done? You're 33. You're coming to the end possibly of your career, at least the twilight years, the veteran years, the experienced years. What have you actually done? I'm still on the ascent and I've already caught up with you, so to speak. I'm not far away from it. Once I beat you, I would have overtaken you. That's how he's seeing it. That's what he's trying to place in the mind of Chris EUBANK. EUBANK is then asked if he's underestimating Ben, and he says, I cannot not underestimate him. He has a promising future in his weight class. In other words, he's just a prospect. I'm going to not kill myself, he says, for this camp. I usually abstain from sex for 8 weeks. Week by week, I abstain, and the longer you withhold, the more testosterone you build. I'm going to abstain for 2 weeks for you. Canelo and Golovkin, they get 8 weeks, right? They get a lot more dedication. But you get 2 weeks. Billy Joe Saunders, he'd get 4. Jake Paul, though, he only gets 1 week. So don't worry, you're not at the bottom of the barrel, but you're close. So he's basically telling him, don't worry, you're not quite a YouTuber, Conor, but you ain't far above a YouTuber. And Ben, obviously, at this point starts laughing, says you don't half talk some ish. It doesn't seem to be affecting Conor too much, this bit. This was just a funny little comment. The one bit that I did think affected him a little bit, which I thought was a brilliant line. EUBANK says, if you pull off a miracle and beat me, I have to retire. And Conor Benn says, be a man of your word then and retire. You're in for the shock of your life. You think I'm going to be a walk in the park? And EUBANK pauses and he thinks. And he says, I mean, yeah, on a summer's day. Yeah. It's just such a brilliant line, the delivery of it. It's as though he's actually analysing what Conor Benn said and he's thought about it. And he's just letting him know, yeah, man, you're going to be a walk in the park on a summer's day. A nice, comfortable, enjoyable night. So you can see that EUBANK, every time Ben is trying to lift his head and trying to deflect and put something on Chris with this aloof attitude starts to put him down. And you can see that although Conor's controlled, just the way he speaks, the way he points his fingers when he's talking, he's got his father in him. They both have this reflection of their dads within them. They both have this approach of being aggressive, of wanting to get in your face. Conor seems a little bit more controlled, but they've got that intense, brooding, sort of moody outlook. Chris EUBANK, on the other hand, he's got the sort of aloof approach that his father's got. That arrogant approach, the cockiness. And since he's become a lot more talkative, that is coming out a lot more. Initially, he used to be almost more distant, didn't he, EUBANK? Now he's starting to use these little quips a lot more to try and get under the skin of Conor Benn. Addy also asks, why isn't the weight at 160? Now, this is a good question because it puts a bit of pressure on Conor Benn. If I was Chris EUBANK, I would have played a lot more on this. I would have said, why isn't it at 160? Because you know you'd get absolutely obliterated at 160, right? You know that you need me to be weakened in order for you to have a chance. But what you don't realise that I'm going to make 157 a lot easier than you think I am. And so what would have happened to you at 160 is going to happen to you at 157 anyway, little boy. You're too small. You're going to get battered. You're going to get creamed. That's how I would have approached it. But EUBANK doesn't respond like that. He waits and he's almost justifying what Conor Benn says here. He's trying to respond to Conor Benn. So EUBANK goes on a bit on the defensive here, almost explaining himself, when for me, he should have gone on the offensive. Because Conor Benn says he's the one that suggested it. And EUBANK says, no, they came at me with something like 153 or something stupid like that. So there was a back and forth and we ended up going to a 157. Why are you justifying that? That's the one error I think Chris really made today. It's almost like you're defending it. Well, yeah, okay, I might have suggested it, but really it was their idea to go lower. Don't do that. Get right after him. Put another seed of doubt in his mind. Let him know that if you're both at your absolute best, he has no chance. That's the approach I would have taken if I was Chris in that moment. Addy then turns to Ben and he said, would you have honestly preferred an extra 1 or 2 fights before EUBANK? Now, Addy here is obviously very neutral, but actually think about the underlying connotations here. Addy, in his own mind, seems to be thinking here that maybe Ben ain't ready. Maybe Ben himself would have wanted another couple of fights. And Ben replies, no, not really. Everyone is a risk at this stage. Thurman, Ugas, they weren't available, so EUBANK takes their spot. A lot of people will feel that this was a case of Ben taking this fight because it was almost a risk-free sort of fight. Because if he loses, he can say, I lost to a bigger man, I'm still a force at welterweight. Whereas if he lost to one of the top welterweights, they need to start rebuilding again. Now, that's the view a lot of people take. That's partially true, I guess you could say. But there is also the potential of a severe knockout against the bigger man. And there's also the potential of him taking something out of you that you then leave in the ring and you're not the same fighter again. So it's a different type of risk, okay? It's a bigger physical risk to fight a bigger middleweight who's operated at super middleweight, has always shown a granite chin and shown the ability to get after big super middleweights too. Even if he lost the fight against Groves, he was actually the aggressor for the majority of the fight. So there's other sort of risks involved there. And he's just saying to him, it doesn't matter. There are top fighters out there. I'm ready for this guy. So that actually does show confidence in the way he delivered it. Now, EUBANK goes on to say, if you pull off a miracle and beat me, I have to retire. And Ben says, well, then be a man of your word and retire. You're in for the shock of your life. You think I'm going to be a walk in the park? And this is where EUBANK drops a beautiful line. He says, I mean, yeah, on a nice summer's day. Yeah. But it was the delivery. It was the pause. So he actually sat there and he thought about it and was like, I mean, yeah, on a nice summer's day. And he has another little think and he just sort of nods his head in confirmation, reinforcing his own initial analysis. Yeah. It's just brilliant stuff from Chris EUBANK. You know, they reflect their fathers in so many ways. When Conor Benn's talking, he's sitting there and he's pointing his fingers at times. He's very aggressive. You can see he wants to just let out this pent-up frustration and energy and anger. And Chris is aloof and arrogant and just putting him down and forever reminding him, I'm always a step ahead of you. It just makes for a superb clash of styles. But there's a lot more to it because Addy turns to EUBANK and he said, is it a lose-lose for you? And Ben interrupts and says, well, why take the fight if it's a lose-lose? And EUBANK gives a very interesting answer. He says, it's never been done before and will never be done again. And yes, I'm getting paid an absurd amount of money, but that's not the reason I'm taking the fight. I want to be able to do something that's never been done before, and that's what excites me. So he's now talking about history. Now, EUBANK's in a bit of a difficult situation here because for me, psychologically, if you want to plant another seed of doubt in your opponent, I would have made out that, listen, this is no different really to fighting a YouTuber like Jake Paul. So why wouldn't you take this absurd amount of money to take on a challenge that really isn't a challenge? Kind of the way Floyd Mayweather would speak when he was asked to fight YouTubers. I'm retired, but you want to give me 100 million to go and fight a YouTuber? Sign that contract, sign that check. That's the approach you could have taken. But the difference is EUBANK's still active. And a lot of people have been very critical of EUBANK and been critical of this choice. So if he goes down that route of admitting that he's going for it for the money, well, then it's like he's admitting he's got no real ambition left, right? So I guess he had to answer that in that way, and I get why he did that. So rather than looking to go on the psychological offensive there, he just spoke about the fact that it's historic and he sought to sell the fight instead. Now, one of the most interesting aspects to me in terms of behind the scenes sort of stuff is the trainer situation with Chris EUBANK Jr. He's saying, there is no trainer at the moment. I need my old man's input and I haven't got it yet. I can't have Roy Jones in one ear and Chris EUBANK Sr. in the other ear. It can't work and I have to pick one or the other. So for this fight, I have to have my old man. But he hasn't told me he wants to be involved. As crazy as that sounds, my dad is a different animal with a different spirit and I hope he's on board. This is interesting to me because let's say, for argument's sake, this is all true and Roy Jones Jr. will not be involved. And instead he's going for Chris EUBANK Sr. You know, Roy Jones is a sort of fighter and trainer who would like to rely on reflexes and pick his shots, lure you into errors. And even if he's leading off to not lure you into errors, he likes to get into positioning and use individual pot shots, sharp shooting shots to cause some serious damage. With Williams, early in the fight in particular, it worked in the sense that he was luring Williams onto shots and he was landing these fast individual shots, and he was showing the ability to get on the back foot and box to the frustration of many other people. I understand Williams was potentially there for the finish, but I'm just talking about the style that EUBANK used and how it worked well for him, because he was very dominant in a fight that people didn't expect him to be as dominant in. It's easy for people to say, well, he should have finished him off, so it was a terrible performance. None of those people expected EUBANK to be as dominant against Liam Williams, right? So holistically speaking, had I told you pre-fight that's how the fight would have gone, you'd have been very impressed. Now, with Conor Benn, perhaps because of the size difference, he is going to look to fight like the old Chris EUBANK. He could look to apply pressure. He could look to want to get in there and make it into a war and use his size. He may not fear Conor Benn's supposed power, and he's going to really want to put it on him. In which case, he may look for the grit of his father. He may be looking to get the psychological, I guess you could say, advantage of having the soldier that's been there in the past, the warrior that's been on the battlefield and overcome the father of Conor Benn. You see what I'm saying? Well, Conor didn't really respond to this in a way that I felt he could have. I would have said, so what you saying that Roy Jones Jr. can't guide you to victory against me? You need your old man? You just said you need your old man's input. Now, he did go on to say, I don't need my old man. He's been holding your hand all along from the beginning. And that's somewhat going partially to that route, isn't it? He's basically saying to him, you're relying on your old man. You're still hanging on to those apron strings. I don't need that. I'm independent. Whether Nigel's here or not, and he will be here, but whether he's here or not, it doesn't matter. I'm going to clean your clock. And that's a good comment, but it just seems to brush off the shoulders of Chris EUBANK Jr. He doesn't seem to pay an ounce of attention to it. And he just basically says, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to enjoy the moment. Ben says, I'm going to go in there and meet you head on. And EUBANK says, I don't believe that. You've got the fire now, but when it comes down to it, and Ben says, what else do you think I'm going to do? This is what I do. And EUBANK said, when you've got a killer in front of you, a barbarian and a savage, you can't fight him the way you did Chris Algieri. And Ben says, we'll see, but is this supposed to be intimidating me? You ain't nothing to me. They end the face-off with a handshake, where Chris EUBANK Jr. says, good luck, sir. And Ben says, I don't need it. You need it, mate. So this is an exciting face-off for me. They both clearly have some belief in themselves, but I think the difference is, and this does not necessarily reflect on the outcome of the fight, but the difference is that Chris EUBANK Jr. is telling him, you are going into uncharted territory. And Conor Benn is conceding this mentally. What happens if early in the fight, Chris EUBANK Jr. starts quickly? Will Conor Benn start to doubt himself? Of course, if Conor Benn starts quickly and he's the one landing big shots early on, he's going to settle. And mentally he's going to start to think, now I know I can do this. But if EUBANK starts quickly and Ben has a bit of a shaky start, is this the sort of thing that's going to make him think, bloody hell, man, he was right all along in that face-off. I am in uncharted territory. I am trying to climb Everest. And the training I've done so far, it's not quite going to cut it. Let me know what you think. Who do you think got the better of it in that face-off? I have to say, for me, it was Chris EUBANK Jr. Let me know what you think. Please don't forget to hit a jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Take care, and God bless.